I was 15 when I found the bug, and I remember the exact sound my desk chair made when I leaned forward. Plastic wheels clicking against cheap carpet like I was sneaking up on something. It was an online game my friends and I played after school. A fantasy world with an auction house, guild drama, and a chat box that felt safer than the cafeteria. I wasn't lonely exactly, but I was invisible in the way quiet kids can be. Present, competent, and rarely chosen first. The glitch showed up like a stutter. I listed an item for sale, canceled it at the wrong moment, and the item blinked, gone, then back, while the game still thought it had been posted. The fee didn't always deduct. That caught my attention. I tried again, slower, then faster, then with a stack of crafting materials. After 10 tries, I had 11 stacks. My stomach tightened, not with fear at first, but with a kind of pleased disbelief. I told myself it was the game's fault. I told myself the company was big. I told myself nobody got hurt when a digital stack of or duplicated. Mostly I told myself I was smart, and smart meant you deserved the advantage. The first week I used it, I stayed reasonable. That's the word I'd use then, as if stealing slowly makes it something else. I duplicated low-value materials and sold them in small amounts. I watched prices dip and rebound. I liked watching the economy respond to me like a living thing. When I bought my first rare mount, my friend Brandon noticed immediately. Brandon was loud, restless, always acting like rules were suggestions made for other people. "How'd you afford that?" he typed. "Market stuff," I lied. He came over that weekend and sat beside me, smelling like chips and cheap body spray, demanding to see it. I hesitated, not because I had a moral epiphany, but because I wanted the secret to stay mine. Then I showed him anyway. I wanted to be impressive, and impressing people was a hunger I didn't admit to myself. He laughed, delighted. "This is insane. They'll never catch it." "Don't go crazy," I said, trying to sound older than I was. He promised. He didn't mean it. A few days later, strangers started messaging me in-game. They asked for help printing items. Some offered PayPal money. That scared me more than it should have because it made the bug real. It wasn't just my little advantage anymore. It was a door other people wanted to kick open. Then an email arrived with a real name and a real signature. Evelyn Carter, Security Engineering. The subject line was polite, almost gentle, but my hands still went cold. She said they'd noticed unusual transaction patterns associated with my account. She said they believed I'd encountered a duplication vulnerability. She asked if I'd be willing to talk. My mother stood behind me during the call like she could block consequences with her body. Evelyn's voice was calm, professional, and this mattered. She spoke to me like I wasn't a child. She explained they had a vulnerability reward program. If I provided a clear reproduction path and agreed not to disclose it, they could compensate me. "How much?" my mother asked before I could stop her. "For something of this scope," Evelyn said. "Up to 300,000. The number didn't land like money at first. It landed like gravity. They sent an agreement full of legal language I barely understood. It described me as a good faith reporter. That phrase sat in my mind like a mask someone handed me. All I had to do was wear it. Here is the first betrayal, even if I didn't call it that at 15. I didn't tell them I'd exploited the bug. I didn't tell them I'd shown it to Brandon. I didn't tell them people were already whispering about it. I gave Evelyn the steps, clean and clinical, as if I'd discovered it, and immediately raised my hand like a model student. My parents signed the paperwork. I signed too, my name looking too small on the page. 2 weeks later, the money hit an account my parents opened in my name. $300,000 on a screen. My mother cried. My father went quiet, then started listing debts like he was reading a grocery list. We paid off credit cards. We fixed the roof. We stopped flinching when the phone rang after dinner. The money did real good, and that made it easier to pretend it was earned honestly. The patch rolled out quickly. The bug vanished. The economy stabilized. I felt a strange disappointment, like a stage had gone dark. Then Brandon messaged me, furious. "They banned me," he typed. "Wiped everything. Said I violated terms." I stared at the words, my mouth dry. He kept typing, each message sharper. You got me into this. You showed me. Now I'm locked out. I could have confessed right then. I could have said I'd reported it, that I'd gotten paid, that I'd lied. Instead, I did what I was already training myself to do. I rationalized and retreated. I told you not to go crazy, I typed. He replied, and you told me how to do it, so thanks. After that, he stopped sitting with us at lunch. He moved to a different orbit of kids. When he looked at me, it wasn't anger anymore. It was something more settled, like contempt. I told myself it was just a game. I said it often enough that it began to sound like fact. In college essays, I wrote about responsibly disclosing a security vulnerability. I made it sound like a civic act. The part where I'd used it, shared it, and then cleaned my hands with paperwork never made it onto the page. I studied computer science. I got internships. I built a career in security, the kind of work where you're paid to imagine how people will cheat. I told the story of the $300,000 bug at parties, edited into a neat anecdote. People whistled and said they wished they'd had my luck. Luck. I liked that word. Luck meant you didn't have to talk about choices. Over time, I stopped thinking about Brandon. When his name surfaced in memory, I'd feel a brief pinch of discomfort, then push it away. Life filled up with promotions, rent, marriage, and then fatherhood. When my son Jacob was born, something in me shifted. Holding him felt like holding a future that could be dented by mistakes I hadn't even made yet. I promised myself I'd be better than my own father at talking, at listening. I promised a lot of things in those first weeks, fueled by exhaustion and love. I was 42 when Evelyn found me again. She sent a message through LinkedIn, friendly and professional. I'm doing a retrospective on our early vulnerability program, she wrote. Would you be open to a call? My first feeling was pride. My second was something colder. Why now? On the call, she asked about my career. I asked about hers. Then she said carefully that she needed to be transparent. There's an ongoing matter connected to that incident, she said. I thought you deserved to hear it directly. My heart sped up in a way I hadn't felt since that first email. She explained that the exploit had been used extensively before they patched it. It caused significant financial loss and long-term damage to the game's economy. There had been lawsuits, investigations, and internal consequences. Some files had been reopened because of a related case. Someone was alleging that the original report wasn't in good faith, that details were withheld, that the vulnerability reward had been used to launder responsibility. And, Evelyn added, her voice still calm, your name is in the paperwork, so we have to treat it seriously. I heard myself say, but it was years ago. Yes, she said, and it doesn't stay years ago if someone drags it forward. That night I told Lauren, my wife, a version of the story I'd been telling myself. I said I found a bug, reported it, got paid. I said someone else was stirring trouble and it might cause paperwork. Lauren listened, eyes narrowing in that way she had when she didn't like the shape of a story. Why would they question you? She asked. If you did everything right? I don't know, I said too quickly. She stared at me for a long time. You're leaving something out. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to be the man who did everything right, the man whose past was tidy. But I also felt the old sealed container inside me starting to crack. I used it, I admitted quietly, a little, before I reported it. Lauren's face changed, not into melodrama, not into shouting, but into something more painful. Disappointment that looked like distance. How much is a little? She asked. I don't know, I said, and hated myself because it was true. I'd never counted. Counting would have made it real. She looked down at her hands. And you never told me. I signed an agreement, I said automatically, then realized how pathetic that sounded. The agreement hadn't stopped me from telling her what I'd done. It had just given me an excuse not to. Evelyn connected me with an investigator, internal counsel, polite but sharp. They asked questions that felt like needles. Who did I tell? What did I gain? What did I notice in the community? Each question relit a moment I tried to forget. I answered carefully at first, then more honestly, as if the effort of maintaining the old myth was finally heavier than the truth. Yes, I'd shown a friend. No, I hadn't reported that. Yes, I duplicated items, but I didn't sell them for real money. I repeated that last part like it mattered more than it did. The investigator's tone never changed. Do you recall the friend's name? I hesitated. Saying Brandon felt like reopening a grave. Brandon, I said. A day later, Evelyn called me directly. I didn't want you blindsided, she said. The person raising the allegation is Brandon. I actually laughed. A short, disbelieving sound that made my throat hurt. That's impossible, I said. I haven't spoken to him in decades, she finished. Yes, he's not alleging as a player. He's alleging as someone harmed by the enforcement actions after the patch. He claims he was scapegoated while the company paid the original exploiter to stay quiet. My brain tried to find a way out. Mistaken identity, coincidence, anything. But there was a slow, inevitable click as the past aligned with the present. It wasn't random. It was my story coming back with a different narrator. I told myself the past was buried. I'd built a life. I paid taxes. I'd raised a child. The bug was ancient history, a weird footnote in a long career. That belief had been one of my quiet comforts. That time, by itself, could make a thing disappear. Brandon's name proved it couldn't. A letter arrived at my office, formal, heavy paper, my name typed with surgical precision. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was a notice, potential deposition, potential disclosure of materials. My hands shook as I read it, not because I was afraid of prison. I wasn't, but because I was afraid of being seen clearly. At home, Jacob sat at the kitchen counter doing homework, humming softly, safe in the way children are when they assume adults know how to keep the world stable. I looked at him and felt a sick twist. My choices at 15 were not only mine anymore. That night, Lauren asked, "What happens if this becomes public?" "I don't know," I said. She nodded like she already understood what I was only beginning to. Reputations are fragile because they're built on stories, and stories can be revised. The second plot turn arrived wearing a hoodie and holding a backpack. Jacob had been getting into games the way kids do. He wasn't obsessed, but he liked tinkering. One evening he said casually, "Dad, can I ask you something?" No freaking out. I felt my shoulders tense. "Okay." He slid his laptop toward me. On the screen was a private chat window. A stranger had messaged him about a dupe method in a new online game. The stranger offered money for details. Not a lot by adult standards, but enough to make a teenager's eyes widen. Jacob watched my face carefully. "I didn't answer," he said. I remembered your story, the one where you got paid for finding a bug. And I thought maybe this is how it starts?" The room seemed to tilt. I saw myself at 15 in his cautious expression, the same hunger for recognition mixed with fear. Lauren stood behind him, arms crossed, the exact posture my mother had when Evelyn called. Lauren's eyes were not angry. They were searching. "What did you tell him about your story?" she asked me. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because the story I'd given Jacob was the neat version, the heroic version, the version that made me look like a guide. Jacob was looking to me for the moral, and I had built my life on avoiding it. I sat with Jacob at the table and told him more than I wanted to. Not everything, there are depths even confession doesn't reach, but enough. I told him I had used the bug. I told him I had shown a friend. I told him I took the money and pretended my hands were clean. Jacob's face tightened, not with teenage drama, but with quiet processing. He was old enough to understand betrayal and young enough to be hurt by it. "So you got paid," he said slowly. "But your friend got banned." "Yes," I said. "And you didn't help him." "No," I admitted. Jacob stared down at the chat window on his laptop. "So what should I do?" The honest answer was, "You should do better than I did." But even that felt like a way to polish myself, like my failure could become his lesson and therefore redeem me. So I said the only thing that felt true without pretending. "You should tell the company," I said. "And you should tell them before you touch it." Jacob nodded once. Then he closed the laptop. "Okay." After he went to bed, Lauren sat across from me in silence. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. "You gave him a hero story," she said softly. "And it wasn't true." "I gave myself a hero story," I said. "He just heard it." A week later, I received a request to appear for a preliminary interview. Remote. Recorded. My employer was informed because of conflict policies. HR called me into a glass conference room and asked if there was anything we should be aware of. I felt the floor drop out from under my adult life. This wasn't teenage trouble. This was career oxygen. "I disclosed a vulnerability when I was a minor," I said carefully. "There's a dispute about it now." HR's expression stayed neutral, but neutrality can be its own kind of judgment. They told me to keep them updated. That evening, an unfamiliar number called my phone. I answered, and a voice said, "It's Brandon." For a second, I couldn't speak. Hearing his voice was like smelling a long-forgotten hallway. Immediate, visceral, and unwanted. "I didn't think you'd pick up," he said. He sounded older, rougher around the edges. "Not evil, just worn." "What do you want?" I asked, and hated the defensive bite in my tone. He laughed once, without humor. "I want you to admit it, publicly. I want the story to be what it was." "It was a game," I said automatically, the old shield rising. "It was money," he said. "It was you getting paid to do the right thing after doing the wrong thing. And me getting burned because I wasn't careful enough to be worth protecting." I swallowed. "I told you not to." "Yeah," he cut in. "You told me not to get caught." That sentence hurt because it was accurate. My warning had never been moral. It had been practical. We met in person 2 days later at a diner off the highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like burnt patience. Brandon was heavier than I remembered. His hair thinner, his hands marked by work. He looked like someone who'd lived a life without soft landings. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten me. That would have been easier to hate. He told me what happened after the ban. His parents grounded him, then stopped caring because they had their own problems. He drifted. He dropped out of community college. He took jobs that didn't lead anywhere. He told himself it didn't matter, because it was just a game, until he realized how often just a game becomes just a habit, and then just a life. "I'm not saying my whole life is your fault," he said, stirring his coffee. "I'm saying that was the first time I learned something important. People will watch you fall and call it your choice, even if they handed you the rope." I felt sick because he wasn't wrong. I had handed him the rope and then stepped back when it tightened. "What do you want from me?" I asked again, quieter. Brandon looked up. "I want you to stop hiding behind the heroic version. I want you to say you used it. I want you to say you shared it. I want you to say the money didn't come from pure hands." "And then what?" I asked. "You get what? An apology?" He shrugged. "You lose the thing you've been living on." I understood then that his grievance wasn't only about the ban. It was about the imbalance. My mistake became a myth that elevated me, and his mistake became a mark that followed him. The third plot turn was realizing he wasn't trying to ruin me out of spite. He was trying to correct a story that had been crooked from the start. The interview happened. I told the truth as plainly as I could, without theatrics. Yes, I exploited the bug. Yes, I shared it with a friend. Yes, I withheld that fact when I took the reward. I said it knowing that honesty wasn't purity. It was just late. A month later, my employer placed me on leave pending review. No firing yet, no dramatic escort out, just a calendar suddenly empty and a badge that didn't open doors. Lauren didn't yell. That was worse. She moved through the house with a careful distance, like she was learning where the cracks were. Jacob kept doing homework. He kept asking for rides. He kept being a kid, but I noticed he watched me differently now, as if he'd learned that adults are also just stories that can change. Brandon's case continued in the background, slow and grinding, like weather. Sometimes I'd get an email from counsel. Sometimes weeks would pass with nothing. Uncertainty became a kind of punishment, not sharp enough to be satisfying, not clean enough to be closure. One night, I found Jacob on the couch, scrolling through a forum post about game security. He looked up and said, "I reported that thing, by the way. The company thanked me. No money, just a thanks." "Okay," I said. He hesitated. "Are you mad?" "No," I said, and meant it. I felt something like relief mixed with sorrow. He'd done it clean. He didn't need my myth. After he went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the same dull lamp we'd had for years. I thought about my 15-year-old self, confident and clever, signing paperwork like it erased what came before. I thought about how long I'd lived as if the past was buried simply because I stopped digging. The karma wasn't magic. It wasn't fate. It was people remembering. It was paper trails. It was a child asking a question I couldn't dodge. It was a friend I'd abandoned deciding he was tired of carrying the ugly version alone. I don't know how my career ends. I don't know if Brandon gets anything from his lawsuit besides the satisfaction of being heard. I don't know if Lauren and I will stay married or just stay polite. What I do know is this: I used to believe time made debts expire. Now I understand that some debts don't disappear. They just wait until you finally have something worth losing.